Football and 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, Jeff Mosher is here. A couple Eagles stories we're going to dive into, some offseason news, some injury updates that we'll get you updated on from Friday. We learned late in the day, according to a report, Nolan Smith played the second half of the Super Bowl with a torn tricep, and that is not a fun injury, although we did see Brandon Graham return from that. So I would imagine that Nolan Smith should be okay and ready to go by training camp. But let's get some thoughts on that and what that means for this offseason and more. Plus, could we be seeing the end of the tush push? We'll bring in Jeff Mosher now from the Inside the Birds podcast, and he joins us now on a Sports Bash Football at 4 Monday with Mosh. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, Mike, how's it going? You enjoying this? Well, you're in an office, but the weather's nice today.
Yeah, I was outside earlier. I did get outside a little earlier today and enjoy the beautiful weather. I feel like I'm at Phillies spring training with this weather right now. So nice out.
That's a little extreme, my friend.
Well, I have been down there where it feels like this, but no, we're ready looking at some of the Eagles stuff here. And first, get your thoughts on that news. A couple things on Nolan Smith, for him to play the entire second half with that thing, and then the possible impact for training camp and moving forward for Nolan Smith.
Yeah, like you mentioned, you saw Brandon Graham be able to come back and play within a pretty short span there of, what was it, like 6 to 8 weeks that it wound up becoming. And he was able to give you some snaps. So it sounds like Nolan Smith should be all right. It all depends, again, on the extent of the tear. Sometimes you get a partial tear. Sometimes you get a full tear. The fact that he was able to play the second half and play through it just shows you that adrenaline is a heck of a thing. And, yeah, he'll have absolutely plenty of time in this off season. Now, maybe he misses a little mini camp time where they take it easy with him in mini camps and at the start of training camp. But he's going to play a prominent role next year, Mike, with Josh Sweat likely to go in free agency and Brandon Graham most, likely, we'll say, to retire, and the Bryce Huff situation sort of uncertain and out there. I mean, it's as we sit here today and talk about the Eagles' edge picture, it starts to me with Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt, which is who would have thought we'd be saying that going into the year.
Well, I want to bring up Smith a little bit here. He played about 70% of the snaps. He had 6.5 sacks. Does that number go up? Does he take a big jump, or is this kind of like, I mean, it's crazy to say is this who he is. But, if you project Nolan Smith going forward, is he a guy that's, still getting up and up and up, or is he a guy that's about 70 snaps, 6.5 sacks, somewhere around there, or do they project more from him?
Yeah, I mean, that's impossible to tell, and it's obviously it's not always about sacks. It's about pressures and the ability to play a certain number of snaps and pinch the pocket. So those are the bigger issues. He made a lot of strides. I think he still has to come a certain distance in terms of hand usage. I thought he made the biggest strides in usage of learning how to turn speed into power. Earlier in the year, he was a speed player, but he had not learned yet how to turn that speed into power. In the playoffs, it was such an unbelievable discovery because he really gave it to two right guards on pulls, starting with Elton Jenkins, putting him out in the playoffs when Jenkins was pulling to his side, and then he gave him the stinger. And then, of course, in the Super Bowl, pretty much taking on Trey Smith head on, and maybe that's where the remnants of the tear of the triceps came in. But you saw the power start to develop in his game. So if you just keep taking that and honing it and refining it, well, he was a first-round pick. So you don't want to put a limit on what he'd be able to do. And I think, like I said, you got to go into next season thinking that he is your starting left defensive end.
Yeah, I mean, you figure as a rookie, I don't think he had a sack, 0. He went from 0 to 6.5, and you're wondering, hey, can I pump that up to 10 and be that kind of guy? He's only like, I think he's like 24, 25 years old. So obviously Nolan Smith, they're going to have to take a big jump. They're hoping to get a big jump from him because that linebacker position, Moshe, seems to be in flux now. They don't know what's going on with Bond. They don't know what's going on with Burks. And then, of course, the injury to Nakobe Dean. So you got to get pass rush from somewhere. And then, you got to figure out what you're doing at linebacker because you're possibly losing Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, two guys that can get to the quarterback. So we might have the same discussion next year as we had early this year. Where are you getting pass rush from?
Very possible, although, that's what they've got free agency and the draft for. But you're right, they're probably going to lose more in free agency, at least from a production standpoint, than they gain because you just never know what to expect from rookies. But the one thing about the Eagles is they typically and generally make good decisions and good additions in the draft at that spot, interior and edge. And you have to think that this draft in particular, which is supposed to be pretty steep at defensive line, means that the Eagles are going to do some work there.
Jeff Mosher, Football at 4. All right, I want to get a couple thoughts on the tush push here. The Green Bay Packers, I guess, have tried to get this thing banned. How crazy is it? Like, are the Eagles seemingly are the one team that has this in the arsenal? Would it be, in your mind, a big loss for this team if that happened?
I mean, it's hard to say no. It wouldn't be a big loss because of how often they've used it, how successful they've been with it. But I have asked myself a lot, what would if you couldn't do the tush push, what would their conversion rate be on just your normal quarterback sneaks, or if you handed the ball to your 230-pound running back, Saquon Barkley, with your big offensive line? I feel like it would still be a pretty high conversion rate. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's sort of you can't win the Super Bowl now because they take it away from you. But, I mean, you can't argue with the results of it and the success of it.
No, you can't. But, I mean, how have we gotten to this point where nobody else in the league, it's almost like it's the Sixers play and the Sixers play. The Eagles play and the Eagles play only. Like, it doesn't seem that anybody else – I mean, some teams have tried it. But no one does it like it's a fait accompli on fourth down. The Eagles are just doing it every time, even when they get to the 1 yard. You don't see anybody else do it to that extreme.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of combinations in that. Obviously, not too many teams have as gifted and big. Some teams have good offensive line and good offensive linemen, but they aren't as massive as the Eagles. And remember, it's still sort of a defensive advantage because at the end of the day, you get the guys in the box and their momentum going forward, right? Just like the Eagles offense, but you have to snap the ball and lean forward. But not a lot of teams have a quarterback that can squat 600 pounds and has that extra kind of giddy up when he gets the ball in his hands. For example, the Packers are a team that has a good offensive line. They have a mobile quarterback, but we saw in the playoffs when they wanted to execute their version of the tush push, they used Tucker Kraft to do it. And that's because a lot of people don't want to put their quarterback in harm's way the way the tush push manifests itself with the quarterback getting under the pile. But Jalen's so big, so strong. I mean, he's not really big, like tall, but he's just a rocked up and very strong lower body, strong trunk. He maintains a good lower balance. The Rams would never want to do that with Matthew Stafford. They'd probably get him killed on the third or fourth attempt. So that's why the Eagles are in that rare position to be able to do it. I think some teams probably could and probably would if they weren't going to outlaw it, which I've been saying now I'm late to it. I can't take credit, but I have felt all along that this play was going to get outlawed. And I really started to finally feel this would be the year, and it might not. But when you saw, was it Frankie Louvu from the Commanders try to jump over the pile a couple of times in the
that Commanders game, it was starting to become a mockery as the official had to get on the mic and put out a rule that not many people were all that familiar with, saying, hey, we might have to make the decision to give them a touchdown here if you don't stop, making this play a joke.
Right, and not only a joke, but I mean, I think when the NFL, because I'm sure they've been waiting for a reason to use player safety as an excuse when it's really what we know is optics. People don't like to watch it. I think that when you see a player like that leap over the top and then kind of land on his neck, and they're gonna point that out and say this is going to now become a player safety concern because you're going to have guys trying to jump over the pile, trying to or jump a leap under, or do some weird things that are going to put their body in even more harm's way. I would be shocked if that isn't kind of the reference point for the league if they wind up banning it.
All right, Jeff Mosher,
safety.
That's today. Apparently, it was the Green Bay Packers are the team. So, Jeff, just to explain to the people, each team or teams can put rules that they want to get voted on. You need 24 of the teams to vote one way or the other. But the Eagles have been a team that have put rule changes on the board in the past. Though the Packers essentially said, we are motioning to ban the tush push, right? And then that at the competition committee will vote on that. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, it gets raised by the competition committee. They have meetings on it, and then I think eventually it goes to a vote of owners, if I'm not mistaken. I kind of forget the exact protocol on it.
All right. So we'll keep our eye on that because obviously that would affect the Eagles more than any other team in the league, right? I mean, it's not even close.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at this point, sure.
All right. We talked about Nolan Smith. What is the outlook for you, Moshe, on Bryce Huff? Is he a guy that they want to try to see if they can get more out of him going forward? I saw, Tim McManus over at ESPN.com said one bold move is to try to trade Bryce Huff. I don't even know that that's possible with that contract. But if they could move him, would they, or do they want to see if they can salvage this thing?
Well, I think it is possible to move him, and I know the contract is what it is, but a lot of that money would drain to the Eagles as well at that. Really, if they're going to absorb a lot, then you're taking on a contract that is not really as exorbitant as it would is if the Eagles just hold on. But there's still a lot of them there. So what I would see happening is...
Hold on one sec, Bush. You got a bad connection there. We'll try to clean up that connection for you here in a second. Because one of the things with Bryce Huff, the Eagles would have to make a trade with a post-June 1 designation. That would give the Eagles an additional $4.3 million in cap space, $3.3 million in dead money. And if the Eagles can get, some sort of mid-round help there. Here's the thing. As somebody mentioned in another article, which was there are two teams that could have some interest in Bryce Huff. One, Robert Saleh was Bryce Huff's coach in New York with the Jets. He could possibly have some interest in bringing him to San Francisco, where Robert Saleh is back as the defensive coordinator. And then Jeff Albright, who was the interim coach for the Jets, he was also the coordinator with the Jets. He was the defensive coordinator when Saleh was the head coach. I believe he went to Atlanta to be the defensive coordinator in Atlanta. So could he say, hey, I got a lot out of this guy. I'll take him back here. So that is a possibility. I guess those two teams will bring Jeff Mosher back into the conversation here for Football at 4. Jeff, those are the two teams I threw out, San Francisco and Atlanta, because Huff played for Saleh and the defensive coordinator from the Jets who just went down to Atlanta. But I don't know how realistic Huff, what kind of value Huff has around the league. Not that you even care what you get in return. That would be more about getting some relief.
Yeah, and that's the point I was going to make. You're not going to get a whole lot in return, but you would move on. Let's say you get like a 6 with a conditional pick, like it can become a 5. That enables you to at least get some kind of small value. And really, you move on. And you were mentioning Saleh. Yeah, I can see because he has a proven track record with other schemes and other coaches that maybe somebody would be interested in being able to take him on, not giving up a lot because of the salary, but you take him on and maybe you get lightning. No, I won't say lightning about it. Maybe you get the Bryce Huff of 2 years ago or something close to that where you feel pretty comfortable.
Why do you think it didn't work? Outside the injury, he was not playing well.
Yeah, he wasn't playing well. There was a lot made about, how Vic was using him, whether he's better with his hand in the dirt or as a stand-up guy. Is he a dropper? I mean, the reality is this. A lot of things in free agency, a lot of times it's projection. The guy did not play full games for the Jets. He was what they call a DPR, a designated pass rusher, because they had their starting edges and he would come in on third down. So he never really had to play the run as much. I don't know how much dropping into coverage he did. There are totally new and different responsibilities when you're playing in the Eagles scheme compared to what the Jets were doing. And sometimes that stuff can get in your head and make you not as fast and reactive as it's been in the past. So that could have been an issue too, where he's swimming and then he gets hurt. So for a whole variety of reasons, it wasn't working. But the biggest telltale sign was that it probably won't work going into the future is even when he got healthy and later in the year and started practicing and the Eagles had some depth issues there, he still wasn't playing. So he's clearly someone who didn't endear himself to Vic. And Howie is smart, and rather than sit here and try to force, have a player on the roster that he knows his defensive coordinator does not want to play, I could see Howie being pretty aggressive in trying to unload him, taking the hit. You won the Super Bowl, so no one's going to really rip you too badly for it, and seeing what kind of value you can get. Now, it doesn't mean it's happening this week at the Combine or before free agency. It could be in the training camp. That's when a lot of those kind of moves are made.
All right, man. Well, we'll keep our eye on that one because if they can figure out a way to move Bryce Huff, I think that would be interesting. Or, quite frankly, if they can figure out how a guy who had 10 sacks a year before and got a $15 million contract, that would be helpful too, right? I mean, how about that possibility?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of hard to have foreseen all of this unfolding and the Eagles still winning the Super Bowl. But clearly, Nolan Smith and Joe Son are the guys that they want to move forward with. So I know that there's this kind of thought process where you keep people think the Eagles are going to hold on to Bryce Huff and see what they got left and, see if they can't coax this or that. And I'm not so sure about that. I think if you're not in the guy's wheelhouse, if you're not in the coordinator's plans, you're not. And kind of like they did with Jalen Reagor after 2 years, they cut their losses and said, that's it. They're not going to play him. He's not. I know what the contract situation is. I know how bad it looks, but it looks worse when you're paying a guy that much money to sit there on the bench and not play.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. Football at 4 here, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. I know Adam is at the Combine. We'll talk to him, get some Combine notes this week. Also, free agency about 3 weeks away from the start of NFL free agency. We'll have plenty of that here on Football at 4. Jeff Mosher, everybody. Thanks, buddy.
You got it, Mike. Take care.
All right, there's Mosh here on a Sports Bash Monday edition. We're only at Monday, but we got a lot happening, including coming up here on the Sports Bash. It's another edition of Nick's Nuggets, and we'll talk to Nick Earnshaw. Flyers hockey this week. Got 3 games for you. Tuesday at 7 against the Penguins. Thursday at 7:30 against the Penguins. Saturday at 7 against the Winnipeg Jets. You can listen to Tuesday and Thursday on 97.3 ESPN. Saturday will be over on our sister station, Rock 104.1. It's a busy sports week here with the Sixers tonight. Sixers tonight, Flyers tomorrow, Sixers on Wednesday, Flyers on Thursday. Both teams play Saturday, so you got a busy week for the hometown teams, and the Sports Bash has you covered. Of course, on 97.3 ESPN, the Phillies are back as well. We'll get back into those guys a little bit later, including that interesting lineup they put out there today. They didn't play today. They got rained out, but they did put their lineup out, and it was interesting. We'll dive into it coming up on the Sports Bash Live. Coming up on the other side, Earnshaw's back with another edition of Nick's Nuggets on the Sports Bash. 426 on a busy Monday. Phillies didn't play today, but their lineup might have been the biggest story of the weekend today, even in the game they didn't play. Sixers have announced that Joel Embiid will not play tonight. We'll see what that means for the rest of his season, but I think it's a fait accompli that he probably will be done. We'll see. And, of course, the Flyers with a big win over Edmonton on Saturday. What does that mean for their playoff push and the trade deadline, which is coming up? We'll talk to Kevin Durso tonight at 5:30 on the Sports Bash, but right now it's another edition of Nick's Nuggets. Nick Earnshaw is host of the Shift podcast. He's producer of The Locker Room, weekends on 97.3 ESPN, and he's back for another edition of Nick's Nuggets, brought to you by the Fanatic Sportsbook at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. There he is. The Nuggets are back. We had Pete's Tenders on Friday, and they were yummy. He had a 4-pack of tenders for me on Friday.
Oh, a nice 4-pack from Pete. How about that? Yeah, it's good to be back in the 4:30 time slot. We did 5 o'clock last Thursday as well. So it's good to be back, Mike Gill. There's a lot to talk about. And, the Phillies lineup, that's one thing. But we got to talk about the 76ers. I think this might be the last 76er nugget I do until the season's over, because I'm so disgusted by this franchise at the moment. I went to the game on Saturday, and I got excited. I protested, Mike. I said on the locker room I was going to protest, not wear any Sixers gear. I did not wear an ounce of Sixers clothing. The only reason I was there is because it was for a buddy's birthday, and I'm a good friend, so I showed up. I don't know why you want Sixers tickets for your birthday, but, to each their zone, okay? Nugget number one, the 76ers season is over, okay? It's been over. It's done. Embiid, he sat out most of that fourth quarter, even on the buzzer beater, right? He was not in the game. The swelling in the knee, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. They have to shut him down. I know the report, our own Michael KB reported it. Shams also reported it as well, just within the past 30, 45 minutes or so, that he will not play tonight. They got to shut him down completely. I would not be surprised within maybe tonight, maybe the pregame presser, who knows, that they announce that he's done for the year. I mean, the guy has said he needs to get the surgery. He's talked about it in his postgame press conferences. Embiid needs to be shut down. You should also just shut down Paul George at this point too, because he has not been healthy this season. Them playing together, they don't look right. They're not giving Nick Nurse a ton of effort, especially on the defensive side of the ball. This season's done. They're in an awful, awful position. I get they're still within striking distance of that 10th spot, right, for the play-in. I get it. But now you're in a position where your star player's hurt. His future, it's not looking great at the moment, especially with a knee injury, his size, his age. You need him to try and get as healthy as possible for next year. You're in a position where you could get a top 5 pick at this point. You got to trust the process and tank for flag. I'm waving the white flag today, Mike Gill. I'm done. Sixer season is kaput. I'm out.
Well, number one, Cooper Flagg is going back to college, so you can't tank for Flagg. Reportedly, anyway, he wants to go back and play at Duke.
We'll see. We'll see.
Number two, they're not going to be the worst team in the league, so their chances of getting Cooper Flagg, even if he did come out, are pretty nil. Now, that being said, this is supposedly a pretty good draft, which will have a couple of players. So if you're in the top 5, you might be able to get a player here. So, yeah, at this point, it's over. You're almost 20 games under 500. Like, enough's enough. Like, even if Embiid can play Wednesday night against the Knicks, I mean, you're likely to lose that game regardless. You're playing the Bulls tonight. Now, this is a big game because the Bulls are the 10 team. If you actually beat them, I think you're like a half a game behind them for a playoff spot. So,
and they've tanked. They said they made it clear at the deadline they're done with their season.
Yeah, they traded Zach LaVine. The Nets, who, by the way, beat you the other night, they have now passed you. The Sixers are actually the 12th team in the playoff race. 10 get in. They are 12. They're a game and a half behind the Bulls. I think it's a game and a half. So it's still pretty close that they can make the playoffs. And I think, like we were talking to Hudrick earlier, he said he thinks they're still trying to go for that playoff spot because these guys are available. Like, I don't know how you look at this and say we're 20 games almost under 500. We just lost to the Brooklyn Nets with Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey on the floor. That's it. We gave you guys a shot to let us try to go for this. Now we have to take over here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're a game and a half out of that 10 seed. Going into that game against Brooklyn, they had the same record as Brooklyn. And Brooklyn obviously has leapfrogged them by a game at this point. Brooklyn has no hope either. It's this is what I don't. This is another conversation, but this is why I don't like the play-in, because you have teams like this who are essentially punting their seasons. I still have a shot to get into the postseason, which is crazy at this point. But for the 76ers, I mean, come on. You're 20-36 at this point. 16 games under 500. You're a game and a half out of the 10 spot. You have an opportunity here with, being in this position, losing out, trying not to win. I mean, to get into the postseason, they're not going to make a run. They're not going to make any noise. Joel Embiid's still hurt. He's not going to be 100%. Even if you get into the postseason, you're not going to be able to make a run. We talked about, all right, maybe they could be a team that sneaks in. It's that type of Sixers year, right? Where everyone hates them. They sneak in, blah, blah, going. No. Embiid's hurt. He's done. He's told the media that he's hurt. You got to shut him down. And without Joel Embiid, they're nothing. Tobias Harris has had a better season than Paul George. Paul George has not looked great in a Sixers uniform. So there's that as well. There's that aspect to it. I mean, Tobias is on the Pistons, but the Pistons are actually in the 6th spot. So you got to give them credit. They've actually had a pretty good season, to say the least. So Paul George has not lived up to the hype at all. He's not 100% either. You went too old in the offseason. You're trying to get younger. I think you recoup everything in the offseason. You make a high-level draft pick in the top 5, top 6, and you go from there. Then you'll have Jared McCain coming back. You'll have a really young, really good player that you draft early in the draft. You can get younger. You just got Grimes, right? You can then replenish that bench a little bit and then try it again next year. Let Embiid get the surgery. Boom. You start over and you go for it again with this window that you have, because you have signed Joel Embiid, Paul George, to these extensions and these deals that go on for the next couple of years. So you are stuck with where you're at. Joel Embiid's not going to have any trade value. So you're not trading him right now. You're just going to have to see if he can come back healthy, and if that knee procedure, if they can get it done, the management of the knee, trying to do the shots, everything, cortisone, whatever, has not worked. They're going to have to go probably opt for surgery. They opt for surgery. You just punt this season. You say that this season's a wash. You go into next year and try it over. And this is a total 180 from what I wish they did probably a couple of weeks ago.
Well, listen, yeah, you're at the point now where the playoffs are ridiculous to think about that. And then the problem is, you said, we talked about it earlier, Joel Embiid, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, he's owed $248 million over the next 4 years. Next year, $55 million. The following year, $59 million. The following year, $64 million. And then the last year, $69 million. So everybody who says it's time to move on from Embiid, that's easier said than done. Do you want to pay that contract? If you don't, what makes you think any other team wants that contract? So you just got to hope that after taking the rest of this year off, that he is back and he's the – look, last year, we talked about this with Paul. Last year, he played the first half of that year. He was going to be an MVP again. He was playing at a higher level last year than he did the year before. He came back and played in the playoffs at less than 100%. And still was the best player on the floor for the team for the most part. So you got to hope that he could get back to that level. I mean, he had games this year. He played a game on the 11th, all right? That was 10 days ago, 15 days ago, where he had 29 points, double-digit rebounds, a steal, a block. I mean, there are nights where he still has shown flashes, even on the one knee that he's playing on. You got to hope that he can get back to that guy on a consistent basis. And I know everyone's saying, no, he can't. That's your only hope, because you can't trade him.
No. I mean, who's going to want him? What are you going to get back for a Joel Embiid who has one knee at this point? You're not going to get anything back. So you got to live with it. And I remember doing a nugget during the offseason. Remember, we had talked a little bit about, are they going to give Joel Embiid an extension? There was reports, all right, are they going to give him an extension? They may have jumped the gun. And I remember talking about this. They should have waited to give him that extension, because they could have let him walk, after this year. I think it was like after this season, the extension was up or whatever his contract was, within the next year or so. They could have waited to give him that extension. And I think it might have been a little bit of a mistake to give him it that early at that price.
Well, it's easy to say that now.
Well, yeah, but Mike, you and I talked about that before. Like, you couldn't just hand it to him at that point in the year. And then all of a sudden, as soon as he signed that contract, boom, stuff with the media happened. All the weird reporting about his injury, the Sixers, like all that stuff started going down, him missing time. Everything just went off the rails after he signed that extension. So, like, I don't know. Did they jump the gun? I mean, hindsight's 2020, but we did talk about it before he signed that extension. The reports and the rumblings started that they may work on something. My thinking was maybe hold up a second, and then look, the knee actually did not hold up like they thought it would.
No, it has not. And, we had a good conversation with Paul Hudrick about where this started, how he got here, and the whole thing. And, when he got to training camp, they were surprised that he was not ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Olympics thing,
by the way,
everything.
When he signed the contract, as Paul, he said, they had double-digit amount of doctors look at this before they said, go ahead and sign him. And this was something that was talked about and looked at by multiple doctors that thought it would be okay.
Yep, and it's not panned out clearly. So they're done. It's over. I am now going to shift my nosebleeds experience to the Flyers because that's an actual team with a future at this point. So I'm going to shift that experience coming up soon to the Flyers nosebleeds. That's where I'm going to be hanging out. All right. Nugget number 2. We got to move.
You could have done both on Sunday, right?
Or
Saturday.
Well, here's the thing. My buddy did do a double dip. He did do a double dip, Flyers and Sixers. I had the locker room, so I would have never made it back for the Flyers game. So I did attend the Sixers game. Wish it was flipped. Would have been much better if the games were flipped. Flyers at the night.
Well,
night
come on.
part.
The locker room ends at noon. You could have got there by the end of the first intermission at worst case scenario.
No, I wasn't rushing. I got to edit everything afterwards. I'm out of there at like 12:30. Game started at 1. It's an hour drive.
So I just said you could have been there by the end of the first intermission.
Yeah, I could have, but I didn't feel like rushing. I wanted to stop home, sit down for a second, get a shower. I didn't even get a shower before the locker room. So, smelled like a locker room in there on Saturday morning. So I had to take care of myself a little bit there, Mike.
Billy, I can smell it already.
I can smell it already, Billy. All right, let's get to nugget number 2. We got to talk about this rule that was brought up by now reportedly the Green Bay Packers and them trying to ban the tush push. I can't stand the tush push detractors. I can't understand it at all. Just because one team can do it correctly, every other team's tried to do it. They just can't do it properly. And the fact that the Packers have proposed this rule change and banning the tush push and that formation, the fact they ran it against the Eagles in that postseason game, in that divisional round game, and I don't understand how you could propose that if you're a team that's actually trying to run it. Just because your defense is soft, you can't. They ran
it a little different. They ran it differently. They had the tight end back there.
It doesn't matter. It's still a variation of the tush push, but you're going to propose to ban it just because the one team knows how to do it? I mean, I don't think it should be banned at all.
Quite frankly, I think the play. If you told me they're banning the play, I'd be like, yeah, it makes sense. This play is ridiculous that you can have two guys literally just push a guy from the back. That play should not be legal, in my opinion, but nobody else do it. I get that point of it. But do I think it's a play that the league should let stay? No. I think the play's ridiculous.
I think it's a fantastic play.
Yeah, of course, because it benefits you. But take your Eagles-colored glasses off.
Josh Allen, the Bills, every team's tried it. Everyone can do it. You can try it. What's the point?
I'm not debating that part of it. My point is the way the Eagles do it. You shouldn't be able to physically push a guy forward like that. That you should not be able to do that. The fact that you can, I'm saying, take full advantage of it while you can. But in reality,
team that does.
I understand that. I'm not debating that portion. I said I don't understand how nobody else can do it or hasn't tried it nearly as the Eagles do it every chance they get. I don't think I've ever seen another team ever actually try to do it the same way they do. But to me, if I'm watching a game and I say, how can these two guys literally push somebody forward, that play should not be legal.
Well, I mean, you do have other variations, like you've had guys pushing piles before. Like That's still it's a variation of pushing the pile. That's essentially.
I think pushing the pile should not be legal.
Oh, I love it.
The problem with the whole pushing the pile, it goes back to you don't know where the spot of the ball is. You don't know where the forward progress is over. So you can't have people physically pushing forward that don't have the football in their hand. It causes more confusion of where the forward progress is and where the ball is. In a league that has so much problem of where the spot is, you can't have people just pushing forward from behind.
See, that makes it fun, Mike. It makes it fun. I enjoy watching as a consumer of the sport. I enjoy pushing the pile, the tush push. I like it. I think it's awesome. I think a lot of people would agree with me, but also agree with you too, that sometimes you don't want to look at it. I think it's great. I love the pushing the pile. It gets you fired up. I love when they let the play extend a little bit. Tush push, just another variation of it. And any team can try it. For some reason, nobody else can do it but the Philadelphia Eagles. If your quarterback is 6'8" and you're Josh Allen, you should be able to get it.
Hey, keep doing it until the play. Keep doing it until they ban it. If you're asking me, do you think that play should be legal? I would say no. I don't think it should be, but I'm not going to tell my team not to do it if they're going to allow you to do it. If I was an owner of another team and they asked to vote on it, I would say I'm voting that down.
I'll also add this point to it. If you're the NFL, why would you want to ban it? The amount of free marketing and discussion and talking about this play, it's beautiful. If I'm the NFL, I'd be like, keep the play, keep talking about it. Everybody wants to talk about the tush push. Is it bad? Is it good? If you're the NFL, I'd be like, no, don't ban this thing. It's talked about all the time.
I think ultimately, and Mosher talked about this during Football at 4, it's probably going to end up being a safety thing, and they'll probably get rid of it because of the head stuff, the quarterback going forward with the head. To me, I thought, like, back in the day, like, you couldn't aid and assist a ball carrier forward.
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, they haven't called it. I mean, they started calling it because of the line, the way you were lining up. Teams are offside, or
like when you try to block an extra point, you can't push a guy forward. That like if you have somebody you can't even line up over the long snapper anymore.
You can't jump over him anymore, right?
Exactly. You can't do anything to gain an advantage. You can't put your hands on your teammate to try to help yourself. So I don't know why the defense can't use the guy in front of them for leverage, but the offense can literally push a man forward and multiple guys. I mean, come on.
I think you should be able to do that on an extra point. You should be able to jump over the guy and get a running start. I think that's great. That's fun. I enjoyed that. When Troy Polamalu used to do that all the time, that was fantastic. This is why the NFL's a no fun league, because now we're going to ban tush pushes. We're banning all this, ban that, ban this. Have fun. Have fun. As a consumer, you want to watch a fun product. I like the tush push. I think it's a fun play. Everyone continues to talk about it. It's going to be controversial, but I think you're right in the sense they'll ban it for safety reasons. That would be the reason to ban it. I like it. I think it's a fun play, and only one team to do it.
By the way, I got a nugget for you.
Oh,
Austin Hayes, 2 homers and 6 RBI today.
You're kidding me, right? You're kidding me. It's spring training. Spring training. Who cares?
It's just a nugget. You could do what you want with it.
I will do what I want. Throw it in the garbage. It's a bad nugget. That was an expired nugget. That's for sure. Because Austin Hayes, he can do all he wants in spring training. We'll see what Max Kepler does. I hope Max Kepler is a little bit better than Austin Hayes last year. We'll see. By the way, we didn't get to see Paul Skeens today versus Christopher Sanchez, and I'm a little disappointed in that, Mike, because I want to see Skeens.
Forget Skeens. Did you see the Phillies lineup that they had out there today?
I did get to see it.
I thought that was they played a game on Saturday. They played a game on Sunday, but I think the biggest story of spring training was the lineup they put out there today.
Do you think, here's the thing, do you think that was a precursor to what we were going to see in the regular season, with Turner leading off, having Schwarber second, Harper third, and Bohm fourth?
Well, I thought the whole lineup was essentially their lineup, except for the center fielder who was not in the lineup. Yeah, the starting Marsh or Rojas were not in the lineup. But everybody else, I think, was hitting exactly where they're going to hit the whole year. Turner, Schwarber, Harper, Bohm, Castellanos, Stott, Real Muto, Kepler, and then the 9-hole hitter. I never thought that they would put the two lefties together like that.
Yeah.
Now, I did throw out a lineup where they put the lefties together against righties, and then
Right.
some days when there's a lefty, they split them. But I always had Schwarber hitting third and Harper hitting second. Interestingly enough, they put Schwarber in the 2-hole, but we talked about this with Bob Wankel earlier today. You still have the same problem of not enough protection for Harper.
I know. It's what I mean. Like, you just all you did was switch the leadoff hitter. That's all you did. I thought this was to protect Harper, move him to 2. I thought we were going to have major change. All we did was switch Turner and Schwarber. That's not the problem.
I don't think you were going to have the major change was getting Schwarber out and moving him, but most people thought he would be moving to the 4 spot and
clean it up
and having
I don't know.
Harper move up a spot to 2, and Bohm would be between the 2 lefties in the 3 spot. Well, today they put Schwarber 2 and had Harper 3. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the way. I know Rob Thompson said yesterday they're going to keep kind of,
they're going to do variations of it. Yeah, they're going to have different variations throughout the spring. They're going to sprinkle it. You're going to see probably Schwarber batting 4th here and there throughout the spring, but this was the first one. It's like, that's it? You only changed the first 2.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that. I was a little surprised when I saw Schwarber in the 2-hole today.
Yeah, it was interesting. All right, final nugget. I do want to bring this up. I tweeted out last night, Mike. So I picked up my my fantasy football trophy from my buddy's house yesterday. So I had that, and then I had it next to my television, and I took a nap. I woke up, and I started watching the final couple of minutes of that Saints game earlier in the year when the Eagles played the Saints week 3. I was down there for that ball game, and I'm going through other highlights throughout the night as well, and I have determined the 3rd and 16 with less than 2 minutes to go in that Saints game in week 3, Dallas Goedert on 3rd and 16, getting that big chunk play to set them up to score on a Saquon Barkley touchdown is equivalent to 2017's Jake Elliott 61-yard field goal. They lose that Saints game, Mike. They're now 1-2. That could have been total disaster because then they lost the following week to Tampa Bay. So if they lose that game and Goddard doesn't get that 3rd and 16 and you have the Saints defense running into each other, that could have changed a lot early on in the season. And that's coming off that Atlanta loss. They would have lost 3 straight games if they lose that game in New Orleans. So I think the Dallas Goedert 3rd and 16 play was the most important play of the Eagles season, equivalent to the Jake Elliott 61-yard field goal in 2017. Mike, your thoughts?
I'll give you a lot of credit for going and finding that play because that play doesn't stick out to me as one I remember all that much. But, yeah, every season has that turning point or that play that you remember. No one has really brought that one up. The 61-yard field goal is a memorable one.
Yep.
We have had people bring up that Giants game, that first Giants game is kind of the one this year where they thought the team maybe kind of clicked and got on. But I'll have to go back and watch the play. I do vaguely remember the 2 Saints players colliding.
Yeah, it was 3rd and 16. I think it was like a minute 36 or something like that. A little over a minute left in the ball game. 3rd and 16, like the Eagles were like done. Like you thought that game was probably over. There was no hope. All of a sudden, you have a Goddard running across the field, and the Saints players colliding in the secondary allowed him to break 3 all the way down. I believe to about the 5 inside the 5-yard line, set up a Saquon touchdown, and then Blankenship when the Saints got the ball back. Interception sealed the game. So,
all right, I'm watching that play now. It was 12-7. There's a minute left in the game, like a minute 5 left in the game. 12-7 Saints. Hurts throws. He's open. The 3 Saints collide. Goddard goes flying up the sideline. He runs all the way down inside the 5. Yep. And I guess the Eagles scored after that and ended up winning that game, 14-12?
15-12. 15-12 because they got a 2-point conversion too.
Yeah, big play. Yeah, you're right.
I think that was a massive play. I think that might have been a big turning point in the direction of this season for sure. So that's equivalent to the Elliott 61-yard field goal in my estimation. All right, 3-pack of nuggets for you today, Mike.
All right, there you go. There's Nick's Nuggets today on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. How was the attendance at the Sixer game on Saturday night?
Packed. Absolutely packed, and I'm shocked. Absolutely packed. We'll see. We'll see how it goes as the season rolls along. See if it starts to dwindle a little bit.
I was wondering about how they're still showing up, though.
Still showing up.
All right. All right, Nuggets. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, see you tomorrow.
All right, there's Nick's Nuggets here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. No Embiid tonight. He has been ruled out. He'll consult with doctors and collaborate with specialists to see what the next move for him will be. New imaging today, according to ESPN Shams Charania. Coming up on the other side, it's Ryan Rothstein will join us for some weekend observations, some topics that we'll dive into, including this Sixers mess. Baseball has debuted something new. How is it working out? We'll get into that as well. More Sports Bash coming up. Plus, our Flyers insider, Kevin Durso, joins us at 5:30 tonight as they come into the back stretch of the NHL season, the trade deadline coming up. All right, 5 o'clock, Sports Bass driving you home. I'm Mike Gill. What's up, everybody? Busy day today. A lot of text messages, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. A lot of texts on the Joel Embiid Sixers stuff today. If you want to get involved in the conversation, you can do so at 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. 0973. Sixers have announced that Embiid will not play tonight, and we're wondering and waiting to see what the next step is. Is it the end of Embiid this season? What about the end of Embiid, period? We'll get into that and more. Ryan Rothstein joins me every day at this time as we do Rye or Cy. Some of the top sports topics each and every day. We'll debate them here on the Sports Bass Live on 97.3 ESPN. It was an interesting weekend. Shams Charania puts out that report, which really was, okay, let's just pull the plug on this season. But Embiid was listed as questionable today. Now, he is out tonight, but looks like Paul George is going to play tonight. We'll see. Maxey was questionable as well. Haven't heard anything up to date on him. So let's get into today's edition of Rye or Cy. What do we know today?
It's just a big old sigh. For me today, I know that much. For Rye or Cy, dude. I mean,
yeah,
come on. Questionable is an understatement. The understatement of the year for Joel Embiid. My goodness, it is just, it's frustrating. It's been frustrating, and that's where we start with Rye or Cy today, Mike Gill, because there's just a lot of layers to this. I'm going to keep it short to start because I want you to sort of lay out your thoughts and opinions on this, but I'll pose it as a question. Is Joel Embiid the main problem here as it relates to the 76ers, right? If we're Daryl Morey, if we're Josh Harris, whoever it is for the 76ers, and we're trying to figure out what the best move is for this franchise moving forward, short-term and long-term, what are we doing to try and get out of the mud? And how do we interpret the Joel Embiid role in all of that?
This is a tough one, man. I mean, obviously the injuries. If we're going to point the finger and say, well, he's the problem because he can't stay healthy, I mean, sure, that's fair.
Yeah.
But, it's not like these injuries are just like him. They've all been pretty major injuries. He said,
Sure.
And look, you can make an argument that by him coming back last year to try to help his team out, that hurt him even more. So to sit here and say that he's the problem, I don't think that's fair at all. He's been the one guy that has been out there that has tried when he has been healthy. You're only any relevancy because of him. When he played last year, you were the number 2 seed. When he left, you fell into the play-in round. That's how important he is.
Yeah.
So what is the problems on this team? Great question. Here's number one. The crowd that just says it's time to move on from Embiid. I got news for you. That ain't happening. And it's even if every single guy in that organization wants to trade him, nobody's going to take on that contract. So that one is out the window. To say, got to move on from Embiid, he's the problem. I'm sorry. That sounds great, but it's not happening. So you got to start to come up with solutions to what you do have. Can he get back to playing basketball at a level that can help you win? I'm not saying even where he was. That can help you win. Okay, we transition over to Tyrese Maxey. Maybe it's more on him. But you got to trade Embiid, that's not happening. That's a pipe dream. He is going to make $69 million 4 years from now. Nobody wants that deal.
No, you can keep going. I mean, I have a lot to say, but if you have more to add, you can go.
Well,
go
listen,
ahead.
I know there's a lot of people that say he's the problem. Fine. He's part of the problem. He can't stay healthy. That's been part of the problem. Yes, that's one. I see a lot of people going after Josh Harris and the ownership group. Quite frankly, if he didn't own the Washington Commanders, I don't think anybody cares about Josh Harris all that much. They have spent money. It's not like they're
done. Yeah.
It's not like they're cheap. It's not like they haven't tried. Every move they made, whenever the Sixers have done something, I think universally everyone's like, I like that move. They made a great move. They went for it. They traded Ben Simmons for James Harden. We like that move. They went out and got Harris at the time. That was a move people liked. Then they went out and got Butler. That was a move people liked. They've signed Paul George. They fired Brett Brown and got a guy who won a championship. Then they fired that guy and brought another guy in who won a championship.
Constantly
so they're not going
role players. Yeah.
They have spent money. They have tried everything. So I can't sit here and say that Josh Harris, somebody said he sits in the front row every night. He's constantly sitting right there on the floor watching this team for the last 10 years. He's not some absentee owner who doesn't spend any money. They spend money. He's always there. They take swings. They just haven't worked. And for the most part, give me a move that they have made where we're like, that was a terrible decision. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Sure, they make mistakes, but I can't see where you can sit here and say any one person is to blame for this, which has just been an unbelievable amount of circumstances that you don't even know where the beginning and the end is of the circumstances.
I know. It's a bleep storm. It's been a bleep storm. That is something that cannot be argued, right? If you disagree with that, then I don't believe that you've been watching this team over the years. So we're on the same page there. And you're right? You started that with saying, listen, this is not Joel Embiid's fault, or it's not fair to say it's Joel Embiid's fault. I agree with you. It is not fair to say that. But I look at this team and I assess it over the past 4 or 5 years. And yes, while I can acknowledge there has been a long list of circumstantial evidence that points to a series of unfortunate events, there's been one constant, essentially, and that one constant has been Joel Embiid. And it's not necessarily his fault, literally, but I look at just this team trying to piece together a winning team, as you mentioned, Mike Gill, signing people, adding championship-level coaches that have been there and done that, adding championship-level role players that have been there and done that. Yet Joel Embiid, fair or foul, he can't seem to be available. And your best ability, cliche time, your best ability is availability. And I'll add this question. Do you believe the Sixers can win a title with Joel Embiid? Whether he's 1, 2, or third option?
Well, now you're getting to the point of his career where this is about where he should be his best. He's at his 30 years old. This should be his prime season. Unfortunately, I think one of the problems this team had was unreasonable expectations from a young age. Give me a team where your best players are your youngest players and you win titles. I mean, look at Minnesota right now. Their best players, Anthony Edwards, they're not ready to win. Why? They're just not ready. Like, they're young guys. This is a man's league still, whether we like it or not. The men still run this league. We had expectations for the Sixers to win titles when Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid were like 23 and 24 years old. That's just not feasible.
But I agree with you. Those expectations are not fair. I would combat it and say, I think the city was more excited than having title expectations. Maybe some people had unrealistic expectations because they had 51 wins. They rattled off 18 of 19 to end that year. Yeah. I'm with you. But I don't think it's unfair to say, okay, the city and the team rallied behind him and they got super excited, right? And like,
that's different,
what does that have to do with today?
You could rally around them and be super excited, but looking back, you're saying, okay, this team never did anything. Well, there's not a lot of players at 23, 24 that lead their team to championships. Those are the stumbling blocks. Those are the ones that you take the losses, you hope to build from them. The problem became they lost in the playoffs a couple times. Well, then Ben Simmons went AWOL. So, like, they never got that chance to kind of go through, okay, we lost, and we lost again, and here we after, like, the third time, they pulled the plug on the Simmons. Well, Simmons pulled the plug on the whole thing.
He pulled his own plug, yeah.
Exactly. So that, like, went off the rails. And then everything they've done after that has been, now we're trying to bring in James Harden. But the problem with that is James Harden's past his championship level of play. And then you have...
And then he weaseled out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because he wanted a contract. And the Sixers smartly said, I don't know that you're worth that contract. So now you're in this whole thing where the guy wants money, but the team made a fiscal decision that was probably pertinent at the time to say, we don't think you're worth that money. Like, what are you supposed to do? So if you give him the money, then the people are saying, you paid James Harden, he hasn't won anything.
Yeah. I know. And the other problem, and you're sort of outlining this, is in the NBA, you can say whatever you want about the NBA, critical, but you still need continuity and chemistry, right? Like you bring up the Minnesota Timberwolves. It takes time to become an NBA champion or even a championship contender. And the problem with the 76ers, they've changed their roster every 6 months for the past 5 years.
1,000%. I mean, look right now. Everybody thought the Knicks were going to just, oh, wow, they got Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah.
And I said here, I don't think that team's as good as the team that lost last year. They're not as tough. That Hartenstein was a huge factor for that team, and they don't have that interior toughness. That's what separated them, from a Boston team. You can't try to out-offense Boston. You got to try to toughen up and try to, toughen up with Boston. So I don't look at the Knicks at what they did. Now, they might play together for 2 or 3 years, and that might kind of click for them. But why did Milwaukee win that title? Well, you had that Middleton, Lopez, Giannis
They played together
for 5-6 tries. The Sixers never got that chance. So I don't know who you want to blame for that. I think some of it's circumstantial. You had a guy like Ben Simmons who you were really good with, and then for whatever reason, he just absolutely, his career took a downward spiral. I don't know what you do with that. Whose fault's that?
It's not Joel Embiid's, right? Obviously, but some of that. Listen, the one thing I've always noticed and complained about with Joel Embiid is he just does not seem to want the spotlight in the playoffs. He just, for whatever reason, maybe it's not fair of me to say, I don't really care. He never seems to say, I'm grabbing the bull by the horns. I got this, boys. I'll get us out of the mud in this game 6 on the road, right? Like he's always shying away from it. It's always the direct opposite. And that's if he's even healthy and available on the basketball floor, Mike Gill. So it's frustrating. And to get back to the point and the question of what or who is the problem and what do we do with Joel Embiid, I don't believe this team can win a championship with Joel Embiid as long as he's still a 76er. And I tend to agree with you on him not being tradable, but we have seen crazier things in this league. I don't think it's completely out of the question.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing people, though, compare it to Luka. Luka Doncic is 25 years old. Of course someone's going to trade for him. He's 25 and considered one of the best players in the league. Different from a guy who's 31 with knee problems and still owed $248 million. Now, if Joel was 25, someone might say, okay, but now you're paying him at 32, 33, 34, and 35 years old. No one wants to do that. But the only thing the Sixers can hope for is they got to shut him down and hope that the rest from March, April, May, June, July, August, September, and then the start of the season, that's 9 months worth of rest on that knee, and hope that at 32 years old, this is your prime years. Look, there's a lot of guys in this league. Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. They're all guys, though, that are still playing at a very high level past 32 and 33 and 34 and 35 years old.
Sure, but I can't compare Embiid to those guys because those guys have been there and done that. Those guys are champions, and those guys have been available. And Joel Embiid has never been any of those things. And I'll say,
I'm just talking about skill-wise. He's every bit as involved in that conversation as an MVP and Olympic. I mean, yes, his availability and his winning track record is not on the same level. I'm just talking about as a guy with the skill set, those guys are still really good players at this. This is where 31, 32, you should say, hey, you've had your failures, you've had your losses, and you're hoping at 30, 31, 32 that all of that has taken you to a point where you're now ready to win a championship. And unfortunately, his body has not allowed him to do that.
No, and I agree with the point of you got to shut him down now. Of course, I don't think anyone is thinking anything else other than that point, Mike Gill, right now. But, I don't want the Sixers to just do that, right? As we discuss Rye or Cy here, I'll sigh at another thing, and that's Paul George, right? And I'll just start with the question of factoring in everything we talked about with Joel Embiid. What does this team do with Paul George right now? And moving forward.
He's a guy that you got to hope. Look, if you really think that George's season, that injuries derailed his season, then you might say, hey, let's shut him down and then take a swing with George, Embiid, and Maxey again. Now we found some younger players. We're going to get Jared McCain back. Grimes is a player. Butler's
Yeah.
a guy that we like a little bit. We got Lonnie Walker. So now we got some
Yabu.
younger guys that we could put around those guys. That's probably the way you have to look at this thing, because I don't know how many people are going to want to say, coming off of this season, yeah, I want to pay Paul George for 3 more years at max money.
Yeah, that's the problem with this team is like the demand for all of these guys has never been lower in their careers. So it makes it even that much more challenging to say, all right, let's pick up the phone and see who has interest in a possible trade.
I liken it to, I said this in the first hour,
Mm-hmm.
they got to take a page from like the WWE. When you have a character who gets stale, you got to write him off the television, get him off the air for a while, and then when he comes back at some pay-per-view, the place goes nuts. Like, dude, we haven't seen that. Because right now, nobody wants to see these characters. So you need to freshen them up and do something different and then bring them back next season.
I think they should shut down Maxey too. I think that should be priority number one. Like, this team needs to tank. Let's go back to the process. Let's tank. Let's not forget about shutting Embiid down. Forget about shutting George down. Shut everybody down. I'll play the rest of the year. Like, let's lose every game we can lose. I want to be in the Cooper flag running. Like, seriously, let's lose every game. That needs to be the mindset. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, a couple things. Number one, Cooper Flagg has said that he wants to go back to school. So everybody's going for a guy who's probably not going to be in the draft. And I don't see why. Right, he might change his mind, but a lot of indications are he likes it there and he wants to go back. And by the way, he has enough NIL money that he doesn't need to go to the league right now. So everybody who thinks that Cooper Flagg, one, yes, obviously, getting a draft choice is paramount for this team right now. They have the problem of they're not the worst team in the league, though. So you're not going to be one of the worst teams in the league.
They're pretty bad.
Yeah,
they're
but
not
they
that
have
far off.
They are right now the 6th or 7th worst team in the league. There's teams that I believe still have single-digit wins. The Sixers are 20. The Sixers are 20 wins. I think there's teams that have like that still don't have 10.
Right. I don't know where exactly they're at, but I know they're in 12th place in the East. I mean, they're not necessarily.
Well, they're only a game and a half behind the Bulls. If they beat the Bulls tonight, they're going to only be a half a game behind them.
Well, and that's the problem, right? It's a lot has happened in a couple of weeks since Daryl Morey spoke on February 7th, I believe it was. But at that time, Morey confirms we're pushing for the playoffs. Now, this team's 0-7 in their last 7. That certainly could change that, but I fear they're still trying to make a playoff push, and I think that's idiotic.
I agree with you. I think they think that they're right there and that – I mean, now listen, this Embiid stuff could change some things. There's the standings right now. You have Washington with 9 wins. You're not catching them. New Orleans 14, the Jazz 14, Charlotte 14. Look, you're 6 games up on them. They're not trying to win either. So it's really hard to catch any of those teams. And if you're not one of the 3 worst teams, your chances of getting the number 1 pick are pretty much nil.
Yeah, very unlikely. So that's fair. But listen, you get in that lottery and you get lucky with maybe the 5th overall pick, 6th, whatever that may look like, you can swindle a trade. You can trade up, right? Maybe you're willing to trade a piece or two along with that pick, right? You just never know.
Listen, I'm not arguing.
Yeah.
Right now, it is imperative that you get because if your pick is 7, it's going to Oklahoma City.
Right. I know. Yeah, they're screwed. I mean, it's just like, I don't know what they do. And that's just the frustrating part, because right now you have a fan base that is so out. Did you see, you and I can sit courtside tonight for $50 a ticket.
Tonight, but Nuggets went to the game on Saturday. He said the place was packed.
Yeah. I mean, listen, they're still going to sell out on the weekends and do well on the weekends. But as we continue to progress here during the week, I mean, that place is going to be a shell of itself.
Yeah, no, listen, I think, look, I tweeted out the other day, it's the least likable Sixers team in 25 years, if not further back. I mean, it's just such an unlikable team. The messaging's been terrible. The optics have been awful. And then you have Embiid, who, people are getting tired of. And then George has come over here and has not ingratiated himself as a fan favorite. He barely has a moment that you can remember.
He looks miserable.
Well, he doesn't want to be here. He took the
No.
4th year, so he doesn't want to be here either. He's hurt half the time. You got Maxey, who generally is one of the most popular sports figures in the city, and somehow this team has managed to make him almost unlikable.
Yeah, because the team is so unlikable, and it's such a bad situation. They're losing so much that he could score 60. It doesn't matter.
Well, listen, the other night when you have Embiid, George, and Maxey on the floor, 3 max players, and you're at home and you lose to Brooklyn, at that point, if you're the organization, you walk in and say, guys, we gave you a shot, and that's the product you gave us. That's it.
It's unacceptable. Mike, I posted a little bit earlier just a 1-minute clip, bunch of clips in a 1-minute stretch of Joel Embiid getting cooked. He was getting cooked against Brooklyn. He was getting beat up the floor. I mean, it was bad, man. It was really bad. It was sad.
It is. I feel like, because people, look, Embiid probably should not have came back and played in the playoffs last year. But a lot of us were like, hey, if he can play, get out there and, see if you can make a run. And, he goes out there on one leg, and he's still the best player on the floor for the most part. I mean, most of those games, he was the best, so it's tough. I mean, the guy goes out there, as he said, I've played with a broken face. I shouldn't have probably been out there. I've played with this knee. I probably should have been out there. But here I am out there, and you guys are criticizing me.
Yeah, but that's the problem, I think, with this injury. I ain't no doctor, okay? But it seems like it's just a degenerative knee issue where the doctors are sort of, their advice is like, yeah, you can play, right? And that's my fear moving forward is I don't know if 8 months on the couch for Joel Embiid is the fix. I fear there is no fix. There is no solution moving forward because of the type of issue that he's dealing with.
Well, it'll be interesting to see because in the NBA, you can't just not play a guy if he's healthy. So I know Embiid is out tonight. He would be legitimate. But Maxey, who is questionable tonight, how can they justify the rest of the season sitting him out?
Yeah, I don't know. And, can they just take fines? Is it worth it? Right? I don't know how that works, what they could do.
Yeah, you can't just say, hey, this guy's healthy, but we're just choosing not to play him. You'd have to come up with something.
Yeah, say it's a knee, back. I don't know what that looks like. They're not going to do that though, but it should be discussed at the very least. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's unfortunate because every year, the last since 2018, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and now 25, every year, it's like, all right, let's get ready for the playoffs. Let's get into this, run here. And, of course, they've been disappointing, but you at least had that to look forward to. It's February 24th, and this season is over.
I want to add this quickly. Are they cursed with free agent signings? When was the last time the Philadelphia 76ers signed a player, a key player, and it worked out? I think it was Dr. J.
We battled about this years ago, whether Philadelphia was a destination or not. I said, it's just not a destination for free agents. Like, people aren't like, hey, they got Paul George. Why? Because they had the money the year that Paul George was a free agent, and quite frankly, nobody else wanted him. Nobody else wanted to go to the 4th year. The Sixers were the only team willing to do it. So for you to be a destination, you had to overpay to get the guy, and now you're stuck with him for an extra year.
Yeah, and that's on I don't know who that's on. It's certainly on the front office or ownership, but we talked about Harden ended up wanting more money. George not really wanting to be here. You have to do some type of homework and due diligence before you get these guys in here, and then they end up hating it, right?
Unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Yeah. By the way, Nick Nurse just updated Joel Embiid. Had imaging done today. He'll have further testing done tonight and tomorrow. After that, he and the team will then get together and decide what the next steps will be. I would imagine he's done.
Yeah. Safe bet.
All right. Good Ryer side today.
Thanks, man.
All right. We'll see you tomorrow.
All
right. He's back on the Sports Bash tomorrow with more Ryer side. Coming up, the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Good conversation there. And where are you guys on that side of the conversation? Do you move on from Embiid? I'm telling you now, you can't trade Embiid. So what do you do? When we come back, the Flyers. Do we have any hope in the orange and black? We'll talk to Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, with all the latest on the Flyers post Four Nations Is there a trade on the way? Can this team legitimately make a playoff push? All that coming up next with Kevin Durso from 97.3 ESPN.com. 531 Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN. Flyers this week, 2 games against the Penguins. You can listen to them both on 97.3 ESPN. Saturday, they'll take on the Jets. That'll be on our sister station, Rock 104.1. Currently, 57 points. They sit 5 behind Ottawa for a wild card spot. Kevin Durso covers the Flyers for 97.3 ESPN.com, and he joins us right now with a look at the orange and black posts 4 Nations with a win on Saturday. That had to be tough for Edmonton, especially. You got Connor McDavid having the moment of his life, probably, having to play against the Flyers. Not ideal there, Kevin Durso, but we'll get into some Flyers stuff as they get ready for the second half of the season with a win against Edmonton and 57 points. Are they even, paying attention to the playoff standings?
They probably are, because that's the way that John Tortorella is. He focuses on the here and now. It's not about the future. It's not about anything in the past. It's what's in front of you, and they're 5 points out of a playoff spot. You can't ignore that part of it. If you're a player, you still have something to play for. But if you're looking for any ounce of should fans get super hopped up about this, Money Puck runs kind of playoff odd percentages, and as of this morning, the Flyers playoff odd percentage was 1.2%. So it's not very likely. They have just, even for the margin, the 5-point margin, there's just too many teams in front of them to have to jump over. All of those teams are going to constantly be playing too. So you're really chasing at this point. If they were 5 points out and maybe only had to worry about 3 teams in front of them, 2, and then whoever's holding that last playoff spot, yeah, they might have a better shot at it at that point, but there's just too many teams to pass over. So it's not looking likely. You're more in still the learning phase of what you have going forward and not about the playoffs.
By the way, they actually also have 58 games, and some of the teams in front of them still have 2 to catch them. So they've played the most games out of that group of teams for the most part as well. 58 for Philadelphia, 57 points there. Ottawa, with 57 games, has 62 points. You would still have to pass Montreal, New York, Boston, and Columbus, and Ottawa, and or Detroit. They are the 2 wild card teams right now. All right, played well Saturday, got a nice win coming out of the break there. But March 7th, who are some of the guys they might look to peel off here as the deadline comes up? Because as you said, they don't seem all that interested in making the playoffs. So they're not trading to add to this team, but they might be looking to subtract.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. The unique part about this trade deadline for them is now following the trade that they already made with Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost. They really don't have anybody on an expiring contract that they have to trade. There's definitely names that they have that could go and be on the move before this trade deadline. Scott Laughton and Rasmus Ristolainen are the 2 at the top of the list. They're the names that are going to be out there more than anything. But they're not in a position where it's sell or nothing at this point, and the guy has the chance to walk away. They still have years left on the contract after this season. So it's not the same thing as your traditional sellers move. The only guy they have on the roster that really fits that bill is Eric Johnson, who is certainly by this point in his career just a depth guy to a playoff team. You'd be a 7th or 8th defenseman on a team maybe looking to make a cup run. There's been some interesting things out there. It's kind of conflicting because the team is not saying anything remotely close to this, but there have been some reports floating around that one of the guys they just got in the trade with Calgary, Andrei Kuzmenko, could very well be on the move again, possibly, if they find somebody with that, if they want to go that direction. They have been saying the opposite. They sound more interested in seeing, what these final 24 games bring and kind of treating it like an audition for anything moving forward beyond the season. And that's probably the way I would expect it to go at this point. But that's really it. They don't have guys that they have to trade. They really just have guys that could be valuable on the market, that if they decide this is the best that they can do for these guys between now and whenever their contracts are up, it might still be the right time. So that's more of what the interesting point is whether or not they find an offer that they feel like they can't refuse, that they have to take right now on a Scott Laughton or a Rasmus Ristolainen and pull the trigger on it. Because if they do, they're taking what they've already started with Joel Farabee coming off the books now. Morgan Frost is off the books. A bunch of other contracts that they're going to have that they free up money as well. The cap increase at the end of this season. They're getting a lot of cap space already at the end of this season. And they could add to it even more if they trade one of those other 2 guys like I'm talking about.
Right, yeah. So would you anticipate the deadline being an active day for them or not necessarily? Because it feels like a team that's kind of out of it. Doesn't have much of an identity here. Might look to do something, but it could be a day where they just kind of stand pat.
It possibly. I think that'll be determined based on how many guys are left kind of on the market and how active the rest of the market is that day. When you look at all the other teams that could look to sell, and if they've got guys who are expiring contracts that are much more likely to be seller moves, then they'll be the guys who are probably more active in this thing. And then from there, if that's hitting a snag, if teams are not convinced, one of the biggest things about this is, we're talking about the possibility of, is there hope for the Flyers to make a playoff run because they're 5 points out of a spot? But that's them and a bunch of other teams. So a lot of teams could take this situation and say, we've still got a shot. Let's go for it and not do anything and keep our guys. I could see a team like Buffalo, who's not necessarily in the race, but Buffalo doesn't really need to keep selling off pieces as much. They got to find something to build around too. They might sit back and say, well, we're not moving one of our guys now. We've done this already. We're going to have to just eat the fact that we're one of these teams now and keep trying to grow with what we've already done. They're a younger team, so maybe they don't sell. Maybe one of these teams that's closer, to that playoff picture, a Columbus or a Boston that maybe you would think is in a spot to sell, they still feel like they got a shot and they say, we're not selling. Maybe they try to trade for somebody, honestly, because they're close enough. So the lack of sellers on the market may dictate whether or not the Flyers move some of these guys that have some years left that aren't traditional selling moves this particular deadline and could make them more active. But I don't expect that to happen per se unless they really get an offer that wows them.
So you mentioned Ristolainen and Lawton. Would they be the two most likely guys moved?
Yeah, definitely at this point. They're the two that hold the most value on the roster at this point. Lawton's constantly brought up because he's really the perfect depth player for a playoff team, a guy who would fit on your third or fourth line and join a team. Toronto and Winnipeg are two teams that have expressed interest in the past. He's been linked to Toronto for 5 years running at this point. They like him a lot. So if they were willing to step forward with an offer that the Flyers really liked, because it certainly is a big deal to trade away a guy who wears a letter and is considered a big leader in your locker room. So they really want something substantial. And if Toronto or Winnipeg or any of those types of teams were willing to give them something like that, it's very possible he get traded. And then in Ristolainen's case, he's played really well this season. He was considered for, he was on the roster for 4 Nations, then couldn't play due to an injury. He came back now right after the break, so everything's fine there. He's had a really strong season. And in particular, the way he played probably over the rest of January into February, he was one of your best defensemen at that time. So if he can continue that, he's got value. A playoff team would love to have a guy like that as well. And again, it's just about the price. The Flyers are going to, at least right now, 2 weeks out from the deadline, run up a high price for guys like this. And we'll see if that changes as it gets closer. Deadlines spur action, obviously. So for now, though, it's going to be a high price for either of those two guys because of the amount of time they have left on the contracts, what they bring to the room, and all of that.
Kevin Durso covers the Flyers, 97.3 ESPN.com. Flyers tomorrow night against Pittsburgh. By the way, they are ahead of Pittsburgh in the standings. They play Pittsburgh Tuesday and on Thursday. They also play Winnipeg this weekend. Winnipeg is the top team over in the Central. So, they got 2 games against Pittsburgh, and interestingly enough, if they win the 2 games against Pittsburgh, all of a sudden you're looking at a team on a 3-game win streak and starting to play better. That wouldn't change their mind, though, correct?
I don't think so, just because it's still too much of a climb, especially when it's a team that's behind them. I mean, in the same vein, Pittsburgh wins both of those games and the Flyers get no more than a point. They're right back behind Pittsburgh in the standings too. So then it just becomes an even bigger climb. And part of it for me also is that the schedule they have really in March is going to be pretty brutal. Winnipeg's on the schedule twice. That's a top team. They play Dallas in the month. They play Washington in the month, Carolina, Tampa twice. These are teams that are going to make
you can make an argument that Winnipeg's the best team in the league.
They're right there. I mean, it's really kind of back and forth almost on a daily basis anymore between them and Washington, and you get both of them for 3 games over the course of March. So I bid you good luck with that situation between one, Winnipeg having arguably the best goalie in the league right now, and Washington having only the guy who's going to set the goal scoring record before this season is out. And I'm thoroughly convinced of it now after he had a hat trick in Sunday's game. He's on his way to it. In fact, not only is he on his way to it, but I put out there on Twitter X yesterday, they've got 11 games between now and when they play the Flyers, and Ovechkin is 11 goals from tying the record and 12 from setting it. So you might want to circle March 20th as a potential, if he keeps this goal per game kind of pace that he's on right now, circle the date. It may very well be a historic night in the NHL. Not that you want to be the team on the other side of history, but it's very possible.
All right, Kevin Durso, as we get out of the Four Nations break here, what have we learned about this Flyers team through 58 games?
Certain things that are positive, certain things that still need to happen. I think we've learned that they, especially from the trade they made with Farabee and Frost, we've learned that now they seem to be positioning themselves to do something aggressive. When that happens, I don't expect it to happen in the immediate, certainly not like at the trade deadline, but I think it sets the stage for an interesting offseason. Like I told you after the trade happened, I think that now that kind of takes a lot of focus off of this season and sets the stage for really kicking this thing into high gear over this offseason, into next season, and the following season. Those are the 2 years that you're going to really try to put some of the finishing touches on this thing and start to get it moving forward. Because if you don't, now you're on to Michkov's next contract. Now you're into into Travis Konechny's contract extension, Owen Tippett's contract extension. The way that Tippett and Michkov in particular played with each other on Saturday, Michkov had a 3-point game. Tippett had 2 goals. They're setting each other up for goals and things like that. That's 2 very key pieces of your future at forward. And what you're really missing in that situation is the number 1 center. They're going to have cap space this year. There's a really good chance they throw out an offer sheet to somebody who's a restricted free agent from one of these teams that may not be able to pay one of their guys who is still on the younger end that's due for a big payday. They might have the money to do it, obviously, if they've freed up all this cap space. And then you start to get into the possibility of, I've floated this out there a couple times. Connor McDavid's a free agent after 2026. And you just, you never know. Money talks. And if it gets to some point, you never know. The Flyers used to be that team all the time that was in on every big name and went out and tried to go fishing for the big fish every single time. That wouldn't shock me if they were in on that again when the time comes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, that used to be them. They used to be the team that if you wanted to get the free agent, they did whatever they could to do it. Are they still that team?
Well, I think that's what they have to prove, is that they're both from a standpoint of being a destination and from, do they have the means to do it? Because it's not the same way that they used to do this anymore. You can't just go out there when Peter Forsberg hits the free agent market, when Danny Briere hits the free agent market, like they did in the mid 2000s, and just throw all your money at those guys. It doesn't work that way anymore. So now they have to make decisions a little bit more, just be a little more cognitive of those situations and what kind of, where the money's going. That said, if you see the names that could possibly make it, and you start to think about those possibilities, like a McDavid, for example, if you feel like you can't pass that up and you actually think you have what's necessary to make a play, then you have to go for it, obviously. And then you hope that you put your best foot forward, that maybe you're the place that convinces him to show up and be part of this thing. And that would be certainly, at that point, it would solve a lot of your problems to get a player like that. That's the elite talent that would certainly push you over the top with a Michkov and some of these other guys that are supporting cast. But that's where it kind of goes.
The last thing for this season is they got to figure out what the heck to do with goaltending.
Well, I think that the goaltending thing really is a long-term future play, that they've got guys in the pipeline that really would make more of an impact at this point. I think Sam Harrison's a nice, solid goaltender, capable starter, I call him. He's not going to be your elite goaltender, but I do think that when you see something like what he did against Team USA in Four Nations and the one start he got, he can rise to the occasion. So he can always give you that kind of game. I just don't know if it's consistent enough. What they have beyond Sam Harrison is really the problem. They haven't gotten a win from a backup goalie in something like 70 some odd days at this point. And so if you're going on 2 to 3 months, this is the same thing. Like it's honestly, this is a Groundhog Day kind of thing, because last season we were doing the same thing. It was Sam Harrison's winning games, and whoever was playing backup, whether it was Cal Peterson, Felix Sandstrom, or, the Zamboni driver, who's your e-bug, it doesn't matter. Nobody was winning a game outside of Sam Harrison. So that's what you have to overcome, is having the second guy, because the best teams in the league don't just throw out, like a Winnipeg doesn't just throw out Connor Hellebuck all the time and win because he's in. They have another guy behind him who can also win games because the team's good enough and the goalie's good enough. You got to get yourself to that standpoint at this point.
Kevin Durso covers the Flyers for 97.3 ESPN.com. A look at the backstretch for them. They've got about 25 games left to go, and you can hear them tomorrow night right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Durso, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
All right, there you go. Kevin Durso, everybody, here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. When we come back, it is the Bet365 play of the day, and we'll finish up today's show. That's next. All right, 5:52. Got the Bet365 play of the day coming up for you in just a second here. Before we get out of here, I want to tell you about my friends over at Game Day Men's Health. Get back in the game. They are dedicated to improving the lives of men and optimizing your health. They have an on-site lab where you can get results in just 15 minutes. I was over there the other day. What a great environment, TVs, great setup. Very comfortable feeling, licensed medical professionals that can evaluate and create a game plan to fit your individual needs and goals. Guys, we're getting older. We're all getting older. I'm right there with you. So get on out there. They can check out all sorts of wellness options for you, including you get your blood work done there. Go out there, bang, get that done. They have a lab on site. 3069 English Creek Avenue, Egg Harbor Township. Game Day Men's Health. EHT. All right, Josh, how did we do this weekend?
Mike, you went 2-1 on Friday. Heat covered by plenty over the 3 versus Toronto. Detroit and the Spurs went way over the 233. Actually, it was over 235 at some of the sports books. But, Mike, the Wizards game was under. So you went 2-1. You were overall 114, 78, and 1.
114, 78. And that one just keeps hanging out there. I don't like it. I'm going to go back to the well with Miami tonight. I'm going to take Miami against the Hawks tonight. That is a 1-point line there. I like Miami in that one. And Denver, -5 against the Pacers. They are my Bet365 plays of the day. I do like the Denver game better than I like the Miami game. There you go. Started watching Reacher, first 3 episodes. I don't like this whole thing now where you have to wait for the episode to come out. Isn't that the point of the streaming service, that you don't have to wait? It's every Thursday. I got to wait now.
It's the new thing now. They're all making people do it.
Yeah, it's like
they're going to drop 2 episodes in one day and you got to wait.
Nah, this one's they're doing it every Thursday.
3 episodes at a time?
No,
just
one episode.
That's what I'm saying. What some of them do is they'll drop 2 episodes first week. But then every week it's
right, exactly. Exactly. Like we watched this week's edition of Severance, and I don't know when the next one's coming out there, but bad job by the streamers.
It's the new way they're suckering you in.
Oh, man. It's going to be a long rest of the – well, I guess spring is almost here. Daylight savings time
Madness.
is March 9th. All right, I'm out of here. Talk again tomorrow. Arrivederci.